Hello and welcome to Gefet in the Daf. I'm Yael Shimoni, bringing to you together with Hadran and Yeshivat Drisha, learning in Iyun in your Q Daf Yomi. And as I was learning the end of our parak, we came across a very fascinating sugya that's actually dwelling on a central question that we have in the whole world of korbanot, atonement. Because here the sugya talks about a new kind of atonement, not atonement of korbanot, but the wearing of the clothes of the Kohen Gadol, Bigdei Kuna, in themselves are causing for some kind of an atonement. And this is really a huge question. What kind of an atonement do they give? Because they're constantly on the body of the Kohen. What are we talking about? And there's a big machloket rishonim here. So sometimes it happens to me that from preparing your Gefet, I go into a very deep sugya, and there are a lot of different ideas here. So I don't know if we'll be able to go over everything I saw, but I'll try to give you as much as I can. We'll begin from Rashi and Tosafot. There are two sugyot here. It's pretty complicated, but I think it's super fascinating. So let's begin. Okay, our sugya says in Zevachim. First of all, we're starting by talking about Bigdei Kuna and that you can't wash them at all. And then we start with the following brisa. Tanu Rabbanan, Me'il kulo shel tchelet hayam, shene'emar v'yas et ha'me'il ha'efod kelil techelet. כיצד? מביא תכלת וארגמן ותולעת שני שזורים ועושה אותם כמין רימונים, and a whole description of how you create the me'il. And then we see a machloket about the pa'amon and rimon, how many of them were actually there on the bottom of the me'il. So the machloket goes as follows. One day, that's Rabbanan, think that you bring 72 pa'amonim and rimonim. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, there were only 36, 36 havu, and 18 on each side. And then Rabbanani Bar Sasson, which is an interesting name, pretty rare name, says you should know that this machloket about the pa'amonim and rimonim of the me'il is exactly the same machloket that you see in negaim. Wow, okay, negaim. We haven't learned negaim yet. Let's see what's the machloket there. כמחלוקת כאן, כך מחלוקת במראות נגעים, דתנן, מראות נגעים, רבי דוסה בן הרקינס אומר, למדו, עקביה בן מהרלאל אומר, 72. So Rabbanani Bar Sasson notices a correlation between a machloket on the me'il and a machloket on negaim. How many kinds of negaim do we have? Do we have 72 or do we have 36? And it's exactly the same machloket that you have on the number of the pa'amonim and rimonim. Okay, so there's some kind of a connection here between these two parashot. And Tosafot actually dwells on that. And Tosafot says, כמחלוקת כאן כך מחלוקת במאות נגעים, פירש רבנו תם, דתלה היי בהי. That Rabbanani Bar Sasson says that these two things are connected. Negaim and Bigdei Kuna, they're connected. And says Tosafot, you have to learn another sugya in Erchin, which we will in a moment, that there we see that actually Negaim is another kind of atonement, not only Bigdei Kuna, but also Negaim, and that's what we will learn presently. Okay, so first of all, we see this connection between Negaim and Bigdei Kuna. Continues Rabbanani Bar Sasson and says, למה נסמכה פרשת קורבנות לפרשת בגדי כהונה, לומר לך, מה קורבנות מחפרים, אף בגדי כהונה מחפרים. So here we have this idea of atonement of בגדי כהונה, as we mentioned before. Korbanot themselves causes a big question. Bigdei Kuna just makes the question even stronger. What kind of an atonement is it that you have a person, the Kohen Gadol, wearing these clothes in the Bet Mikdash? How is that helping you atone for your sins? So let's go in and see how does this atonement work. And Rabbanani says that each garment is atoning for something else, and he has a whole list here. So the first, כותונת מכפרת על שפיכות דם. שנאמר וישחטו שעיר עזים ויטבלו את הכותונת בדם. This was the parsha now of the selling of Joseph, that they were hiding the fact that he was sold. So then they took his garment and put it into blood. That's a hint that the kutonet will be atoning for shfichut damim. That's a very bad hint, I think. מכנסיים מכפר על גילוי עריות, שנאמר ועשה להם מכנסי בד לכסות בשר ערווה. Arayas is the trousers, the מכנסיים of the kohanim. מצנפת מכפרת על גסי הרוח. מנין, אמר רבי חנינא, יבוא דבר שבגובה ויכפר על גובה, being גסי הרוח. thinking that you're much more than what you are. This is a different sin. It's more a sin of midos, but still, the mitznefet is mechaperet on that. Avnet mechaper al irhur alev. Avnet is what you tie. You close. It's like some kind of a long rope that the Kohanim are holding all of their stuff together, all of the garments together. And we hear her that we put it actually rather high because mechaper al hirhur alev. And חושן מכפר על הדינים, שנאמר בעשית חושן משפט, מצוות דינים. Sometimes we don't do good things, that's the kapara of the חושן. אפוד מכפר על עבודת כוכבים, עבודה זרה, שנאמר הנפות וטרפים. מעיל מכפר על לשון הרע, מניין אמר רבי חנינא יבוא דבר שבכל ויכפר על כל רע. The מעיל makes noise because it has the פעמונים ורימונים on the bottom, so that's why it's מכפר על לשון הרע, because it's on that sound. And tzitz mechaper al azut panim, on chutzpah. Tzitz, what you have here on the forehead, mechaper al chutzpah, because the forehead is a symbol of chutzpah. So we have here a whole list of chataim. Inside this list, we have 3 chataim, which are the greatest sins we know of. We also have here dinim, which is one of Sheva mitzvot Bnei Noach, and we also have here lashon hara and Ga'ava and Gasut Ruach, Azut Metzach. These are also midot, and all of these things are the atonement of Bigdei Kuna, this whole list. So this is an interesting list, but the Gemara doesn't talk about the actual list. It's asking a specific question on 2 parts of these that were listed. Ini, שואלת הגמרא, ואמר ביהושע בן לוי, 2 דברים לא מצאנו להם כפרה בקורבנות, ומצאנו לו כפרה ממקום אחר. ואלו הן שפיכות דמים ולשון הרע. So we have a different memra of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, that he says that there are 2 things that you don't bring korban for, but you have atonement elsewhere. Lashon hara and shfichut damim have different atonement. Where? So Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi doesn't say the garments of the Kohen Gadol. He says egla arufa for shfichut damim and lashon hara for ketoret. How do we know that? And we have here Mekoret explaining that ketoret is there for lashon hara and egla arufa, it's written in the psukim. It's for shfichut damim. So these are the 2 things that are contradicting. The only 2 things that the Gemara will deal with. And then the Gemara gives an answer. Actually, we can explain why shfichut damim has 2 different kinds of kapara. Lo kashya, hade yadia man dekatle, hade lo yadia man dekatle. Ide yadia man katle, baktalahu, b'meizid velo etru b'lashon hara nami lo kashya, ha b'tzina, ha b'faresya, and the end of the parak. So we are interested at understanding the resolution of the Gemara for the question it asks. And around this resolution, we have many, many deot. We'll begin with the day of Rashi. So Rashi here comes to explain to us why does shfichut damim have 2 alternative atonements, also the garments and egla arufa. So explains Rashi, egla arufa, that's when you don't know who killed. Yadia man dekatle is when you do know when somebody was killed, and then you can't use the atonement of the egla arufa. But then the Gemara asks, if you do know who killed, you have to kill him. That's the deal. How come he's not being executed? How come there's still something to atone? And Rashi explains, that's describing a situation that we know who killed, but we don't have the power to execute him. That happens most of the cases, because according to Din Torah, you can only kill a man that is a murderer if you have 2 people who saw him doing it, 2 people, specific people who told him, if you're going to do it, you're going to die, hatra'ah be'edim, and that's a situation that is very rare, and many people we know that they killed because people who were psulim saw them that they killed, or we know it from other circumstantial evidence. That's not enough to kill a person. In that instance, says Rashi, the tzibur still is stained with a sin, because they can't actually execute this person. That's when we need this extra kapara as a collective for Bigdei Keuna, And he says, in that situation, that person who killed and we can't kill him will get negaim, as you will learn in Erchin, says Rashi. But the ones who need extra atonement are the tzibur. So let's try to sum up what Rashi said regarding the kutonet, and we'll see that when he comes to talk about Lashon Hara, there he is not talking in the same language. Okay, so first, let's just sum up Rashi. We have the stira. On one hand, the kutonet atones for murder. On the other hand, we see that exiled atones for murder. This is a contradiction. How do we resolve it? Exiled is a communal atonement for a case when we don't know who the killer is. And when we do know who the killer is, but there's no legal technique to kill him, we can't kill him, we can't punish him, then we as a collective also need atonement. We can't use a glaufa because the glaufa is only in case that we don't know who killed. Here we do know, but there's a technicality, we can't kill him. So these two are collective atonements in different situations that the tzibur is caught into. Now, the person who killed, he'll get negaim anyway, right? He'll get negaim, according to Rashi. But the tzibur, they're the ones who need this special atonement, either iglaufa or kuton. But when Rashi comes to explain Lashon Hara, he only talks about tzina v'faresia, and he doesn't say anything about this collective atonement. So it seems that according to Rashi, this special atonement for the collective, that's only in the kutonet, but the other bigdei kuna, the other garments, are not dealing with this collective atonement. So let's see, why is this the case? Why we have this special atonement of bigdei kuna for murder, but they don't act the same way for other sins? And for that, we have to go to Masechet Erchin. Also, Tosafot told us we should go. So I'm moving to Erchin, to Zayin Amud Aleph. And there, the Sugya says there's 7 things that you get negaim for. Tzarat. Okay? Lashon hara, shfichut damim, shvuat shav, gilui arayot, gasut ruach, gezel, v'tzarut ayin. So we see here a list that is not exactly the same list we have in Zevachim, but at least we have 2 or 3 or 4 things that are in both lists. Lashon hara, it's in this list of negaim and also in the list we have in Zevachim. Shfichut damim, it's in this list and also in the list in Zevachim. Shvuat shav doesn't correlate. Gilui arayot, again, in the 2 lists. Gasut ruach in the same 2 lists. Gezel, tzarut ayin, only negaim. So the Gemara asks, wait, this list is strange. We know that Rabbanit Bar Sasson that we saw in Zevachim, he thinks that many of these things are atoned by bigdei kuna, and here they quote our Gemara of Rabbanit Bar Sasson, and we have this entire list of errors, and we see the contradiction. So then the Gemara says, okay, there's no contradiction, lo kasha. Ha de ahanu ma'asav, a de lo ahanu ma'asav. I ahanu ma'asav atu negaim alei, I lo ahanu ma'asav me'il mechaper. So the Gemara seems to focus on one point in this list, only Lashon Hara. And if you look in Erchin, you'll see that that's really the connection there in the Gemara. The Gemara was dealing before in Lashon Hara. And why do I think that the Gemara is talking only about Lashon Hara? Because it said Me'il mechaper. Me'il is the only one who is mechaper on Lashon Hara. So it seems there's a contradiction between Lashon Hara in the list and Lashon Hara in Rabbanit's list. And the solution is that at least in Lashon Hara, ahanu ma'asav, then there's one rule. Lo ahanu ma'asav, there's a different rule. Ahanu ma'asav, he gets negaim. Lo ahanu ma'asav me'il mechaper. So let's see what Rashi explains in this wording of the Gemara. What does it mean? Ahanu ma'asav, lo ahanu ma'asav. What's this? So Rashi says, what's ahanu ma'asav, what's lo ahanu ma'asav? Let's see. I want to read him with you so I don't make mistakes. Just a minute. Says Rashi, ahanu ma'asav denitkotetu al yadu. So Rashi explains that Lashon Hara doesn't always work. what's the story of Lashon Hara? We say Lashon Hara because we want to cause people to go against each other, right? So sometimes you say Lashon Hara and it works, and the people fight each other. That's Lashon Hara ahanu ma'asav. In that case, you get Nagayim. But if you said Lashon Hara that actually didn't cause what you wanted it to cause, that's when the Me'il is mechaper. Okay, that's according to Rashi. And Rashi explains also why did the Gemara not say anything about shfichut damim and arayot. So Rashi says you should know that shfichut damim and arayot, it's not a question. The Gemara doesn't deal with that question because bigdei kuna mechaprim, that's not about the person. It's about the tzibur. Both in gilul arayot and both in shfichut damim, says Rashi, we have a rule that these two averot are so bad that not only the sinner is caught by the sin, but also the whole tzibur. He says, Rashi, לשפיכות דמים כתיב כי הדם יחניף את הארץ, ובגילוי עריות כתיב ותטמא הארץ ויפקוד עוונה עליה. These are two chataim that have this extra atonement because they actually are spread all over the tzibur. So that's why you need bigdei kuna there. But Lashon Hara, says Rashi, is a different question because Lashon Hara, it's only on the specific sinner. And there you have to have a different answer. Sometimes it works what he's trying to do, and sometimes it doesn't work what he tries to do. So if I'll sum up Rashi, all in all, we see that when we're talking about Lashon Hara, the sin of Lashon Hara doesn't cover the entire tzibur. So you don't. That's why the kuna don't cause this extra atonement for the tzibur because there's no need for it. So there we have to explain the atonement differently. We have to say that it's when somebody didn't actually get to what he wanted to achieve with his Lashon Hara. That's when he has this extra atonement of bigdei kuna. But if he actually did achieve what he wanted to do, he made people fight, then he'll get Nagayim. And when we're talking about both shfichut damim and both gilui arayot, so there, the tzibur needs atonement, and Rashi explains how the tzibur is in two different situations when we know who killed, but we can't execute him because it doesn't work according to Torah law, so we still have to atone us. So now we see that Rashi thinks that always bigdei kuna offer a more general atonement. An atonement, there's things that are more airy. It's really the tzibur that didn't do anything, but it was somewhere there in the background of the murderer of the Gilui Arayot. And it's in Gilui in Lashon Hara when you sinned, but you didn't cause other people to sin. So what's connected to the atonement of the entire bigdei kuna is that it gives this extra plus atonement. But as we see, different parts of the begadim do different kinds of atonement. So there is something connecting. They're both like weak atonement, but they're of a different kind. That is the shita of Rashi. Tosafot, both here and both in Zevachim, didn't like what Rashi said. At least some of the Balei Tosafot didn't like it, and they offered different explanations. The first here is the Ri. The Ri thinks, and I am in Erechim. I'm studying from Tosafot there in Erechim. אומר רי, דמשפיכות דמים לא קשה מידי, לפי שיש עליה מיתת בית דין ובגדי כהונה מכפרים על המיתה, אבל נגעים מי הבאים עליו. Ri says, I don't think the bigdei kuna have to create different kinds of atonements. Everything has to be the same. Bigdei kuna have to help the sinner, not the tzibur, and they have to help the sinner atone a bit. So Ri says, I think that the atonement of the kutonet, what it does is that somebody who's chayav mita will be taken down to be only chayav negaim. That's what bigdei kuna do. They take him one notch down. So Ri here is going in a very different direction. But this direction of Ri is actually causing us a new question, because according to Ri, if I'm a murderer and I murdered on purpose, why would I get this atonement even if I didn't repent? The fact that the Kohen Gadol is wearing the kutonet will never get me to die because I'll be only chayav negaim. That's very hard to understand in the Shita of the Reed. So let's continue. Od yesh mefarish, a different Baal Tosfot that he doesn't tell us who. He says, I have a different solution. I think that bigdei kuna atone, not when you did real shfichut damim, when you did something that is semi shfichut damim. What's semi shfichut damim? כגון שלבי מפני חברו ברבים. Okay, semi גילוי עריות, כגון that you created tension between man and wife. So according to this Mefarish, he says, I want to read Masechet Erchin and Masechet Zevachim together. And I want to read the last sentence of the Gemara, on all the sins in the list. And I want to say that Bigdei Kuna Bechal atone for things that are not really 100% Chataim. Not the classic Chataim. Chataim that come near to these things. And what's interesting about the Yesh Mefarish, that on one hand, he's putting all of the Gemara together, saying the same thing. He's also saying that Bigdei Kuna all deal with the same kind of sins, and it's not this strange list that I noticed before, 3 very heavy sins and 2 like sins of midot. No, everything here is more sins of midot. It's people who act badly. They're not really crossing a clear line. Also, shpichut damim is not really a clear line. It's more amalbim pnei chavero barabim. So that's od yesh mefarish. So let's see what we saw up till here. Machloket Ri and Rashi. Rashi said, when it comes to shpichut damim, we're talking about atoning of the tzibur. The Ri said, no, this can't be atonement for the tzibur. I want to say that this is about the chote himself. Eglau, it's the tzibur. What can I do? It's written in the Torah. But kuton, that's not for the tzibur. That's also for the sinner himself, taking him a notch down. That's a machloket between the Ri and Rashi. And the other Mefarish, he says, no, you have to understand all of the garments are not dealing with real hardcore sins. They can't be an atonement for a real hardcore sin like that. There are other, if you don't atone for that, we will leave the land, we'll go on galut. No, so what are we talking about? We're only talking about things that are more in midot. That's what Bigdei Kuna atone for. So, up till now, we saw Rashi in Zevachim and Rashi in Erchin. We also saw Tosafot in Erchin. And let's go to Tosafot in Zevachim. Tosafot in Zevachim, he adds another sugya for us. Well, you know what? I think I will skip the Tosafot here. At least the whole explanation is background. I think this is enough for us. These 3 different shitot that we saw: Rashi and Ri and Od Mefarish. Now, I want to go to the question that the Rosh asks on the sugya, the question which really rings through the sugya that I mentioned before. This whole idea of atonement is very hard to understand, because when it comes to korbanot, you have the sinner doing tshuva and bringing the korban to Beit HaMikdash. So I can understand there's atonement with tshuva. But here, the Kohen Gadol is wearing the garments somewhere elsewhere, and the sinner continues with his bad deeds. How can somebody who's still sinning be atoned? This is very hard. How can you atone mazid? And the Shita Mekubetzet on Erchin brings the Rosh that asks this question. He says, תמיה לי טובה, מה פריך? וכי בגדי כהונה מכפרים שלא יענשו אף מי שאינו שב בתשובה? אם כן, למה גלו ישראל ולא נתכפר להם על עבודה זרה שעבדו ועל גילוי עריות ושפיכות דמים? The Rosh says, I don't understand the sugya. How could the sugya בכלל be match between Eglah and the atonement of Bigdei Kuna? The sugya seems to understand the atonement of Bigdei Kuna actually clears the sin of avodah zarah, gilui arayot, shfichut damim from Am Yisrael only by the Kohen Gadol wearing the garments. How could that be? We know that Am Yisrael went on galut, so obviously the Kohen Gadol wearing the garments wasn't enough to atone for all these sins, which were the reason why Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. So something is strange here in the sugya. That's a big question that the Rosh asks. So what are the answers to this? So first of all, let's see. Rosh's question is really hard on 2 out of, well, actually on all of these Mefarshim. Okay, let's see. According to Rashi and Tosafot, This atonement is for the tzibur, right? Did the entire tzibur actually do tshuva? Is the tzibur aware of all of its chatayim that it gets this atonement? So that's a good question on Rashi. According to Tosafot's question, Tosafot's answer, that what we do is that we take somebody who killed and we move him a notch down, the re. That's also problematic. How can we move a notch down? He didn't do a tshuva. And according to the Od Mefarish, people do these bad things, all kinds of bad things. This is not 100% avodah zarah, not 100% gilui arayot, not 100% shfichut damim. These are all kinds of other things. But do you do tshuva? How can you get atonement if you're not doing tshuva? So the Rosh question is really hard on everyone, I think. And if we look at the Marasha, which he's an Aharon, and he knows the sugya, and he knows the answers, and he knows the question of the Rosh, he says, I have an answer. This is a Marasha on our sugya. לוודאי הדה כאמר בגדי כהונה מכפרים על שפיכות דמים, גילוי עריות ועבודה זרה, היינו השוגג דווקא. Oh. So the Marasha says, this is atonement for shagaga. When you do something b'mezi, you don't get atonement for bigdei kuna. When you do something b'shagaga, you're not 100% aware that you did wrong, and therefore you're not doing tshuva because your awareness of your sin is not big enough, and that's what bigdei kuna are actually doing. That's the kind of atonement that they offer you, an atonement for the shogeg. But says the Maharsha, I have a small problem with what I'm saying because the sugya did a kushya between bigdei kuna and egla ufa. Egla ufa, it doesn't sound that the person who killed the man was shogeg, right? So how come we're talking about these two atonements on the same line? This is atonement for mezi, so it sounds from the sugya that also bigdei kuna are b'mezi. But the Maharsha says, I think I have an answer for that, but think on your own. So let's try to offer an answer for the Maharsha. The Maharsha said it has to be shogeg. Maybe glarufa, when somebody killed and you don't know who killed him, we're talking about atonement for the tzibur, like Rashi said, but the tzibur really were not aware that something bad was happening. So this might also be considered shogeg. Maybe that's an answer for the Maharsha. So I'll sum up the four different answers that we had in understanding what kind of atonement bigdei kuna offer. So according to Rashi and some of Balei Tosafot, this is an atonement for the tzibur. The tzibur that didn't sin but has bad sin in him, then they need this extra atonement of bigdei kuna. And when we're talking about Lashon Hara, that's an atonement when you didn't manage to actually do what you wanted to achieve. It's like a half a sin. What Rashi Tosafot say here still have the problem of the Rosh. What about amazing? How come you get atoned if you did something amazing? According to the Ri, this atonement takes you one notch down. It moves you from being chayav mita to being chayav negaim. Again, the same question of the Rosh. How come you get atonement when you're not doing tshuva? The Od Mefarish in the Tosafot and Erchin said that we're talking about semi sins, not hardcore sins. Again, the same question. How come the sinner is getting atonement without having done tshuva? According to the Maharsha, we're talking about shogeg. And maybe we should also use the Maharsha to explain Rashi and the Od Mefarish and say that when you do these chata'im, which are somewhere in between, like the Od Mefarish said, maybe you're not aware of how bad your sin is, and that's why the kutonet is there to atone for you. And maybe when the tzibur is in the background, the tzibur doesn't understand that they're doing something that's causing murderers to come out of them. So that's why we need this extra atonement. But of course, if somebody did something on purpose, b'mezi, and he didn't do tshuva, he will not be able to get this extra kapara of bigdei kuna. So this was our sugya today, and I think it really offers us a big understanding that atonement can be in many different levels. And sometimes people who are not really aware of what they're doing need this extra atonement. But the whole idea of atonement, not without kavana, is problematic, even though it's brought forth here. And maybe it's there to help us as a tzibur take more responsibility for our role in sins that individuals do in our society. So I hope you enjoyed this. I really felt that this Gefet opened up this whole issue of atonement for me and caused me to go into new sugyot that I didn't know before. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And Bezrat Hashem, we'll meet soon to learn together again. Take care.